Hello. In every forgotten corner of the earth, there are ancient secrets, some of which would rather remain undiscovered. In the village of Dunwhiddle, an old well was once found, so deep that its water seemed to hold the living memory of darkness itself. But before you get comfortable, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and let me know in the comments which city you're watching from and what time it is there. I'm really curious to see who's joined us. Now, settle in. We're about to begin. If you are reading this, congratulations. Either you have a keen interest in the mundane lives of medieval peasants, or you have run out of better things to do before bedtime. In either case, you will soon find yourself in a place called Dunwhiddle, a village so small and unremarkable that even the map makers ignored its existence. You, dear reader, are not a hero. You are not even particularly clever. You are just a tired old man with sore feet and the kind of back pain that only medieval agriculture can provide. It begins on an evening much like any other. You are trudging home after a day spent alternately scowling at your neighbors and pulling weeds out of soil only slightly more fertile than a brick. There are whispers among the village women that the lord of the manor might lower the grain tax this year, but you, being old and sensible, know that optimism is for children and idiots. The sun is setting. The cows are sullenly chewing their cud. The air smells faintly of manure, but then again, it always does. This is where you, without any dramatic music or warning from the heavens, step off the main path. Why do you do this? Even you are not sure. Perhaps you want to avoid Widow Harrington, who always corners you with stories about her rheumatism. Perhaps you hope to find a slightly less muddy shortcut to your hut. Or maybe, just maybe, you are tired of your own predictability. In any case, you veer left, duck under a drooping branch, and shuffle through the undergrowth. You have not ventured into this part of the forest in years. It is a tangle of brambles, nettles, and unfulfilled potential. The birds, sensing your approach, cease their chattering and stare at you with tiny, judgmental eyes. The silence feels heavy, but you assure yourself it is only the natural silence of a world not yet full of shouting children. You prod at the ground with your walking stick and move onward. Suddenly, your stick hits something hard, not the usual rock or half buried piece of ancient plowshare, but something with a hollow echo. You squint and prod again. The ground gives way beneath the brambles, and you discover, with the excitement of a man who has not had much excitement since the last bad harvest, a circle of mossy stones. A well, or as your generation likes to call it, the last place you want your grandchildren playing. The well is old, possibly older than the village itself. It is half covered by a rotting wooden lid and surrounded by a shroud of nettles. The stones are slick with lichen. A cool draft rises from its mouth, carrying the earthy, slightly metallic scent of water untouched for generations. You are, of course, wary. Old wells are places where small children disappear and where one might accidentally meet the occasional vengeful spirit or, worse, an estate tax collector hiding from his responsibilities. Nevertheless, curiosity has always been your one vice. You clear away the nettles and peer inside. The well seems absurdly deep. You lower a pebble, count the seconds, and listen for the faintest splash. There it is, a sign of water, or something watery enough for your purposes. You recall, with a certain fondness, the last time you tasted well water. That was before the village council decided everyone's health would be much improved by drinking muddy river water instead. You hesitate, but the ache in your back and the dryness in your mouth are persuasive. You find a rusted old bucket, attach it to a length of fraying rope, and send it wobbling into the darkness. After a long moment, the bucket comes back filled with water as clear as glass and as cold as the glare of the churchwarden when you snore during services. You sniff it. It smells pure, which you remind yourself means nothing. You take a cautious sip. The taste is remarkable. It is fresh, with a faint, unfamiliar tang that lingers on your tongue. You drink deeper. You imagine you can feel the coolness spread through your limbs, settling the aches in your joints and clearing the fog from your head. It is the best water you have ever tasted. You wonder, briefly, why no one else has rediscovered this well. Sufficiently refreshed, you replace the lid, pull your cloak around your shoulders, and make your way home. The forest seems less hostile on the return journey. The birds resume their singing, and somewhere in the distance, a fox yips at the fading sun. You arrive at your hut just as the last light drains from the sky. You build a small fire, eat a dinner of stale bread and watery cabbage stew, and wait for the familiar heaviness of sleep to descend. You wait a little longer. The shadows lengthen. The fire dies down. Your eyelids do not droop, and your mind does not wander. Instead, you find yourself wide awake, staring at the dark ceiling, wondering why, for the first time in many years, you do not feel tired at all. You tell yourself it is nothing, just an odd night. You have always hated change, and tonight you sense the world is quietly changing around you. If only you knew how much. The next morning, you realize something is terribly wrong, or right. It depends on your perspective, and yours, as we have established, is thoroughly jaded. You sit up in your straw mattress, expecting to groan and stretch and mutter about your aching spine. But no ache greets you. No cobweb of drowsiness clings to your mind. In fact, you are remarkably alert. Annoyingly so, you stand and wait for the usual slow protest of your joints. Nothing. For a moment, you wonder if you have died quietly in the night, and this is the afterlife, a dismal place filled with chores and stale bread. But then you stub your toe on the battered chest at the foot of your bed, and the jolt of pain reassures you that you are still alive and still as clumsy as ever. You shuffle to the door, open it, and stare out at your corner of the village. The sky is pink and cloudless. The chickens are already squabbling over some miserable scraps, and your neighbor, old Gilbert, is attempting to milk a goat with the single minded focus of a man who hates goats. Everything is as it should be. Everything, that is, except you. You watch Gilbert from your doorway, waiting for the familiar urge to yawn, to stretch, to contemplate returning to your mattress for just a little while longer. The urge never comes. Instead, you find yourself restless, filled with an energy that you suspect is unnatural. You decide to busy yourself with chores, if only to exhaust whatever restless spirit has possessed you. You chop wood. You weed the patch of dirt you call a garden. You repair the hole in your thatched roof that you have ignored for 3 winters. By midday, you have completed all the tasks you have postponed for the last year. You stand in the center of your yard, hands on hips, waiting for fatigue, for the irresistible tug of sleep. Still nothing. The thought occurs to you, unbidden and unwelcome, that perhaps the well has something to do with your new state. This is the sort of idea that once lodged in your mind refuses to leave. Like a persistent fly or the parish priest's sermon on thrift, you resolve not to mention it to anyone. If there is one thing you have learned in your many years, it is that nothing good ever comes from curiosity. Nevertheless, you cannot help but wonder. By afternoon, you notice other villagers behaving oddly. Not that odd behavior is uncommon in Dunwhiddle, but today it is different. Young Edith, who usually naps beneath the apple tree every afternoon, is up and about, sweeping the path in front of her cottage as if she intends to sweep all the way to the next parish. The miller's boy, known for sleeping through even the noisiest thunderstorms, is wide awake, stacking sacks of grain in neat, if uneven, towers. Even old Gilbert, who would sooner wrestle a wild boar than miss his midday nap, is alert and scowling at his goat with renewed vigor. You decide to pay a visit to Widow Harrington. She is the village's unofficial source of news, gossip, and unsolicited advice on the management of minor ailments. You find her standing by her garden gate, vigorously pruning a rose bush that has not bloomed in living memory. You are up early, she remarks, eyeing you with suspicion. I could say the same for you, you reply, attempting to sound casual. She sniffs. Could not sleep last night. Not a wink. You know, I am beginning to think it is something in the air. You nod and make non-committal noises. The conversation drifts, as it always does, to the misfortunes of her late husband and the moral decline of the younger generation. But beneath her complaints, you detect a thread of unease. It is not just you. The village, it seems, is wide awake. As evening falls, you brace yourself for another sleepless night. You try all the old remedies: warm milk, dull conversation, counting sheep, even listening to old Gilbert's tales about the war, a surefire method for inducing unconsciousness in most listeners. Nothing works. You sit by your dying fire, staring at the flickering shadows on the walls, your mind alert and traitorously clear. Hours pass. The world outside grows quiet. The silence is oppressive, filled with the faint sounds of the village: dogs barking, a shutter banging in the wind, the distant hoot of an owl. You lie on your back, staring at the ceiling, waiting for exhaustion. It never arrives. Instead, your thoughts turn, once again to the well. The memory of that cold, clear water lingers on your tongue. You recall how the village elders used to warn children against drinking from unknown sources. But you are no child, and you have survived worse things than a mysterious well. At least, you hope you have. The night stretches on, impossibly long. You watch the moon crawl across the sky, tracing the hours in the shifting light. By dawn, you are still awake, still restless, still filled with a peculiar energy that is equal parts invigorating and unnerving. On your third sleepless night, you give up all pretense of normality. You rise, dress, and walk the empty streets of the village. The houses are dark, but you see flickers of candlelight behind a few shutters. You are not alone in your insomnia. You pause by the village square, staring at the old oak tree in its center. For a moment, you think you see movement in the shadows, a flicker, a shape that does not belong. You blink, and it is gone. You tell yourself it is nothing, just your tired mind playing tricks. But you are not tired. That is the problem. That is the whole cursed problem. You return home as the sun rises, no closer to sleep than before. In the cold, clear morning, you feel the first pricklings of unease. Something is changing in Dunwhiddle. Something has awoken, and you, whether you like it or not, are wide awake to witness it. The days, if they can still be called days, begin to blur. It is not just you anymore, though you, of course, are the first to admit you are neither trendsetter nor leader. But Dunwhiddle, slow and stubborn as it is, starts to stir with a sort of nervous excitement. The well, your well, though no one is so impolite as to call it yours, has quietly entered the daily conversation. It is as if the well has always been there, a part of village lore, simply waiting to be rediscovered and redisrespected. At first, you attempt to keep your discovery secret. This is less out of a sense of ownership and more because you have lived long enough to know that nothing good comes from sharing good fortune. But secrets are as rare in Dunwhiddle as honest waits at the mill, and before long you spot your neighbor's son, the one with a penchant for trouble and an aversion to honest labor, skulking near the bramble patch. He claims he was looking for mushrooms. You are not fooled. By midday, there is a quiet but steady procession to the edge of the woods. They come in pairs and threes, carrying buckets, pots, and in one case, an ornamental soup tureen borrowed from the manor house. The sound of rope creaking over the old stones becomes as familiar as the church bell. No one says a word about the purpose. No one mentions the sleeplessness either, but you see the same alertness, the same bright eyed restlessness reflected in every face. You watch the village adjust to its new reality with an air of ironic detachment. There are, it must be said, certain advantages to never sleeping. The chores that used to pile up like leaves in autumn now vanish overnight. Fences are mended, roofs patched, and firewood stacked with an efficiency bordering on the miraculous. The village square, once deserted after sundown, is now a bustling hub at all hours. The smith sharpens his tools by moonlight. The baker, unable to stand another night in his own company, begins baking extra loaves for those who wander past. Even the priest, who once insisted that all good souls should be in bed by the second bell, is seen muttering his prayers in the pre dawn darkness. You too find yourself filling the endless hours. You reread your one book, the collected discourses of St. Harold the Uninteresting, twice. You reorganize your collection of oddly shaped stones. You consider taking up whittling, but decide you would rather not lose a finger to inattentiveness. The truth is, your mind feels sharper than it has in years. You remember conversations from your youth, the faces of long dead friends, the exact number of beans you planted 3 springs ago. It is all there, perfectly preserved, as if your memory has shrugged off its cobwebs. Of course, it is not all improvement. Tempers fray. The children, deprived of the blessed oblivion of sleep, become insufferable tyrants. Husbands and wives bicker over trifles with the intensity of lifelong enemies. The goats, disturbed by the constant bustle, grow jumpy and irritable. Even the village dogs, creatures known for their devotion to both naps and scraps, begin to eye their owners with a mixture of confusion and contempt. You have at least the comfort of not being alone. At the weekly market, you listen as the villagers dance around the topic. Strange times these, mutters old Gilbert, his eyes ringed with dark shadows. Never felt better, though. Have you? Oh, never better, says Widow Harrington, who looks as though she has not sat down since your conversation in her garden. Yet underneath, you sense an unspoken anxiety. There is a new tension in the air, like the heaviness before a summer storm. People begin to watch the darkness at the edge of the woods. They glance over their shoulders as they walk home at night, or what passes for night in a village that no longer sleeps. One evening, unable to resist the collective unease, you join a group of villagers gathered around the well. They speak in low voices about dreams they used to have, about how strange it feels to live without the little deaths of slumber. A few admit quietly that they miss it, the comfort of closing their eyes and drifting away. Dreams were the only time I ever saw my old man smile, says the thatcher, and everyone pretends not to hear the catch in his voice. It is then that you first hear whispers about the other thing. Have you seen them? Asks Edith, her voice barely above a whisper. The figures? At first, you think she means the drunken apprentices from the mill, known for their midnight antics, but her expression is too serious. In the lanes, by the crossroads, sometimes just outside the window, no one laughs, no one even asks for clarification. The silence is thick with understanding, and for the first time, you realize that the sleeplessness is not the only gift the well has given. You walk home under a sky bruised with midnight clouds, turning Edith's words over and over in your mind. You recall, uncomfortably, that flicker of movement by the old oak tree, the shape you told yourself was nothing. The night feels longer, heavier, and you catch yourself glancing over your shoulder more than once. You resolve, as all sensible men do, to ignore anything that cannot be explained by indigestion or a guilty conscience. But when you reach your door and fumble for the latch, You see something move in the shadows, pale and indistinct, but undeniably there. For a moment, it seems to watch you, then, as suddenly as it appeared, it melts away into the darkness. You enter your hut and bolt the door, heart pounding in your chest. The fire has died down, and the familiar outlines of your possessions look strange and unfamiliar in the flickering gloom. You remind yourself that you are too old for ghosts, too practical for superstitions. But as you sit by the cold hearth, staring at the dying embers, you wonder how much longer you can keep pretending. Sleep is gone from Dunwhiddle, and in its place something else is stirring. You, wide awake, are left to watch and wait, whether you want to or not. You are not a superstitious man, or so you tell yourself, as you find yet another excuse to stay indoors after sundown. The well has become the talk of the village. No one dares say as much, but every conversation bends toward it, the way a tired ox leans into the yoke. For a while, the novelty of perpetual wakefulness carries a kind of grim excitement. The baker boasts of never burning a loaf. The blacksmith claims he can shoe a horse in the time it takes most men to find their hammers. You, on the other hand, would give anything for a single satisfying yawn. It is not the lack of sleep that unnerves you. No, it is the feeling that the world has grown thin, like an old shirt worn soft in too many places. The ordinary things, the color of the sky at dawn, the sound of rain on your roof, feel ever so slightly wrong, as if you have woken from a dream and cannot quite remember what was real. You first see them, not shadows, not exactly, in the small hours, while you sweep the dirt floor of your hut for the fourth time in a night that will not end. It is the corner of your eye, the shifting gray just beyond the reach of your lamp. A figure stands in the doorway, tall, indistinct, more suggestion than substance. You whirl to face it, your heart thudding, but when you look directly, there is nothing, only the chill, creeping certainty that something was there and has chosen not to remain. You tell yourself it is a trick of the mind, a symptom of too much clarity and not enough rest. But then it happens again, at the edge of your garden, just beyond the tangled row of gooseberry bushes. A flicker of white, a sense of movement. You step out, call into the darkness, and are answered only by the indifferent rustling of leaves. You try to speak of this to old Gilbert, but the words catch in your throat. Instead, you ask about the weather, the state of his goat, the price of turnips at the last market. Gilbert nods, grunts, then glances at you with a look that lingers too long. Strange times, he says, and you hear the same note of unease you have come to recognize in your own voice. The villagers begin to avoid discussing the well altogether. Instead, you all talk in circles of the harvest, of the parish tithe, of the new rooster that refuses to crow at dawn. Anything but the real matter, which grows, hour by sleepless hour, more impossible to ignore. You try to be rational. You retrace your steps, check the brambles for footprints, examine your hut for drafts that might cast strange shadows. Logic, you find, is of little comfort to a man who cannot remember the taste of sleep. Then, one moonless night, you see her, a young woman, or a memory of one, standing at the far end of your garden. Her hair is long, tangled, and drifts about her face as if stirred by a wind you cannot feel. Her dress is old fashioned, older than anything in your memory, older perhaps than the village itself. She watches you with a look of profound sadness, her eyes hollow and shining. You freeze, you cannot move, cannot speak. The only sound is the distant barking of a dog and the rapid thump of your own heart. She lifts one pale hand, not to wave, not to beckon, but simply to let you know that she sees you seeing her. Then she fades slowly, as if submerged in deep water, until nothing remains but the memory of her presence and the certainty that you are not alone. You close your door and push the bolt home. You light every lamp you own, though the shadows only gather more thickly in the corners. When you press your face to the window, the night is so dark that it seems to press back. You do not sleep, of course, but you do something very much like cowering, though you call it waiting for morning in your own mind. Dawn, when it comes, offers little comfort. The villagers move through their tasks with a mechanical efficiency, their eyes glazed and wary. You notice Edith, always the first to speak her mind, rubbing at her arms, glancing over her shoulder as she tends her hens. The miller's boy has taken to wearing a sprig of rosemary pinned to his shirt, muttering that his grandmother swore it would keep away the dead. Even the priest, who once claimed that faith could banish any fear, has begun to lock the church doors at night and double the bolts on his own house. You gather with the others at the well. No one drinks now, at least not while anyone is watching. A few mutter about bad dreams before remembering that none of you have dreamed in days. Widow Harrington, ever practical, suggests that the well should be filled in, but no one volunteers to do the digging. The well, for its part, sits silent and inscrutable, the water below as smooth as glass. At last, Edith speaks. "We are not alone," she says, and her voice does not waver. Something has come back with the sleeplessness. You want to contradict her, to laugh and remind everyone that shadows are just shadows, but the words die before they reach your lips. You return home under a sky the color of slate, your mind crowded with questions you are too tired to ask. That night, you keep your lantern burning, but the darkness presses close, curious and patient. The woman comes again, or perhaps it is only your imagination, though you are certain now that it is not. She stands at the edge of your sight, waiting, as if she knows you have nowhere else to go. The days march on, unbroken by sleep, each one a mirror of the last. You and your neighbors go through the motions, clinging to routine as if it might hold the world together. But with every passing hour, the boundaries between what is real and what is possible grow thinner, and you begin to suspect that you have all stumbled into a story much older than any you have heard before. You wish, as only a rational man can, that you had simply left the well alone. For a while, you try to convince yourself that you are the only one beset by these visions. It is a comfortable lie, one that lets you hold on to the last shreds of your self respect. After all, it is preferable to be singularly mad than to admit that the entire village is unraveling. But Dunwhiddle is a small place, and secrets find little room to hide. It begins, as all things do in Dunwhiddle, with a conversation you do not wish to have. You are stacking wood by your door, keeping one wary eye on the shifting shadows under the eaves, when old Gilbert appears, clutching a mug of weak ale and wearing the haunted expression of a man who has run out of things to complain about. You have seen them too, he says, without preamble. For a long moment, you contemplate lying, but there is something about Gilbert's face, something brittle and desperate, that convinces you otherwise. You nod once and return to your woodpile. He stands in silence, watching you, as if waiting for you to say more. I saw her again last night, you say finally, the woman by the garden. She does not speak, but she looks at me as though she remembers something I have forgotten. Gilbert lets out a breath he did not know he was holding. Mine are children, 3 of them, sometimes 4. They run along the fence line, always just out of reach. They laugh, but the sound, it is not right, not laughter for the living. You are both silent. There is nothing to say. Instead, you watch as Edith hurries past, her apron flapping like a frightened bird. She glances at you, then away, her gaze drawn to the empty air beside the well. For a moment, her lips move as if in conversation, though no one else is there. You shiver and remember a time, though it seems impossibly distant, when Edith was the boldest voice in Dunwhiddle, forever laughing at her own jokes. Later that day, you gather with a small group in the square. No one calls it a meeting, but the air hums with shared unease. Widow Harrington is there, knitting something that looks more like a nest than a garment, her hands trembling. The miller's boy fidgets with his rosemary sprig, his eyes darting from face to face. Even the priest, pale and sweating, has come out from behind the locked doors of the church, though he seems to regret it almost immediately. It is Edith who finally speaks, her voice sharp with forced cheer. I suppose we are all seeing things now. Ghosts, spirits, whatever you want to call them. Some say it is the sleeplessness, but I think it is the water. She glances at you, and you feel an odd sense of relief. Someone else is willing to say it out loud. There is a flurry of nervous agreement, the kind that comes when the unspoken has been dragged into the light. The priest, clutching his worn prayer book, insists that it is a trial sent from above. Perhaps we are meant to reflect on our sins, he says, in the tone of a man who no longer believes his own sermons. Widow Harrington scoffs. If the Lord wanted to punish us, he would have sent more rain, not ghosts. This is older than any church. Her words hang in the air, heavy with meaning. You recount your own visions, the woman, the way she fades into the earth, the sadness in her eyes. Others chime in, shapes in the fog, voices whispering just out of earshot, shadows that linger too long. It becomes clear that no one is truly alone, not anymore. Your madness is, at least, a communal one, A quiet consensus forms. No one will drink from the well again. But even as you make this promise, you sense it is an empty gesture. The damage is already done. The water has soaked into your bones, and whatever lies beneath the surface of that ancient stone circle has been disturbed. As the meeting breaks up, you notice the children. They have taken to playing in silence, their games oddly subdued. One little girl, the potter's youngest, draws circles in the dirt with a stick over and over, as if tracing some secret path. You remember, with a chill, the tales your grandmother used to tell, stories of restless dead and ancient places best left alone. Night falls, and the village retreats indoors. The hours lengthen, as they always do. You try to busy yourself, but every task feels futile. The fire, the dishes, the endless sweeping, none of it keeps the shadows at bay. Eventually, you sit by the window, watching the road that leads into the forest. It is not long before the woman appears. This time, she is not alone. A second figure stands beside her, a child, hand in hand, gazing up with eyes as wide and empty as the moon. They do not move, they do not beckon, they simply wait. You press your forehead to the glass, searching for some sign that this is a dream. But dreams require sleep, and sleep, it seems, is gone from your life. Instead, you are left with the bright, merciless clarity of endless wakefulness. You wonder, not for the first time, if this is what it feels like to be haunted, less by ghosts than by your own relentless mind. Morning brings no relief. The villagers gather in the square, exchanging stories in hushed tones. No one laughs. No one dares to suggest that things will return to normal. Instead, you all cling to routine, as if it might save you. As you go about your day, you realize that Dunwhiddle has changed. It is not just the sleeplessness, nor the ghosts. It is the knowledge that you are all, in some small way, connected, bound together by the water, the well, and the stories you now share. You find comfort in this, strange as it seems. If you must be haunted, at least you are not haunted alone. In the days that follow, you become something you never wanted to be: curious. It is a dangerous occupation in Dunwhiddle, where questions have a habit of leading to trouble, and the answers, if they arrive at all, are rarely comforting. Yet you find yourself compelled by dread, by hope, or perhaps simply by the absence of sleep, to search for an explanation for the shadows now sharing your world. You begin by revisiting the well, hoping that in daylight its mysteries will seem smaller, its dangers less threatening. The brambles have grown back quickly, as if nature itself regrets your meddling. You push them aside, feeling the sting of nettles through your sleeves. The stones are colder now, the moss a deeper green. You peer into the darkness, but the water, as always, gives nothing away. You try to remember the stories you heard as a child, half whispered tales of haunted places and hidden things. There was a saying, you recall, about wells: water remembers what the earth forgets. You do not know what it means, but it feels true in a way that makes you uneasy. Unsatisfied, You seek out the oldest inhabitant of Dunwhiddle, Agatha, who is neither witch nor wise woman, but somewhere stubbornly in between. Her cottage squats at the edge of the village, roof sagging under the weight of years, windows clouded with the dust of 100 seasons. Children give her house a wide berth, and adults do not visit unless they must. But you are not a child, and you are in need. You find Agatha hunched over a table, sorting dried roots with a precision that suggests she has been awake even longer than you. She does not look up as you enter. You have come about the well, she says, and you feel a shiver run down your spine. Sit, if you have the courage. You sit. She pours you a cup of something dark and bitter, which you pretend to sip. She begins to speak, her voice rough as gravel, her words flowing like the stream behind her house. There have always been places like that, she says, old places where the world grows thin and the past seeps through. Your well is such a place. I warned the last fool who found it years ago. He did not listen, and now neither do you. You bristle at this, but hold your tongue. It is not the water itself, Agatha continues. It is what lies beneath it, memories, regrets, the footprints of all who ever passed this way. You drink, and for a time you are freed from the needs of the flesh. But nothing comes without a price. The dead remember, even if the living forget. You try to press her for details. What are these shadows? What do they want? She fixes you with a gaze sharp enough to cut bone. Want. They want what everyone wants, to be seen, to be remembered. Some are gentle, some less so. The longer you go without sleep, the more you will see. The more you see, the harder it will be to look away. You are not reassured. Agatha sends you away with a pouch of dried herbs and instructions to burn them at your door. It will not banish them, she admits, but it may remind them to mind their manners. You thank her, though the words feel hollow. It is a comfort, perhaps, to pretend that something can be done. That night, you follow her instructions. The herbs burn with a pungent, acrid smoke that fills your hut and makes your eyes water. You wait, hoping for some sign of change, but the shadows return as always. The woman in the garden, the child at her side, the silent gathering at the edge of your vision. If anything, they seem more present, more intent on being noticed. You walk through the village, desperate for distraction. You find Edith sitting on her stoop, staring into the darkness. She tells you that the shapes she sees are different now, closer, more insistent. They try to speak, she confides, but their voices are lost, like wind in the trees. The priest, when you seek him out, has taken to scribbling prayers on scraps of parchment, tacking them to doors and windows. He admits with a tired laugh that he no longer knows if his prayers are for the living or the dead. You pass the miller's boy, who is methodically stacking stones along the path to the well. Barriers, he says. Grandmother always said you can keep spirits out if you are clever. He does not sound convinced. There is no comfort in routine now. The sleepless nights have bred a new restlessness, a kind of collective impatience that simmers beneath the surface. Arguments break out over trivial things. The best way to sharpen a plow, who forgot to bring in the laundry, the relative merits of goats versus sheep. You suspect these quarrels are not about chores at all, but about fear of the unknown, fear of what waits beyond the candlelight. You consider leaving Dunwhiddle, striking out for the next village, or even the distant city. But something holds you here, a sense of responsibility, or perhaps simply the knowledge that the well's influence does not end at the village edge. The water is in you now, and you are inextricably bound to the others. You fall into a strange rhythm, days filled with chores, nights filled with shadows. The boundaries blur. Sometimes, as you walk the familiar lanes, you catch yourself speaking aloud to the shapes at your side. They do not answer, but you sense their attention, patient and unyielding. You return to Agatha once more, desperate for a solution. She listens, silent as always, then shakes her head. There is no cure for what you have unleashed, only endurance, and the hope that in time the dead will lose interest. You leave her cottage with a heavy heart. It is not the answer you wanted, but it is the only one you are likely to get. That evening, as dusk falls and the first ghosts appear at the garden gate, you wonder how many more nights you can bear. The world outside your door is unchanged. Fields, fences, distant hills, but inside everything is different. You are different. You light your lamp and sit by the window, watching the darkness gather. Somewhere, out beyond the reach of your light, the woman waits. You no longer fear her. She is as much a part of your world as hunger or hope or rain. You whisper a greeting, and in the silence you almost think you hear her answer. You might have thought, in your younger and more optimistic years, that there could be a limit to how strange things could become in a small, stubborn village like Dunwhiddle. You might have supposed there would be a bottom to the well of oddness, so to speak, a point at which the world would right itself and order would return, even if only to bring back the minor miseries of mud and taxes. But that, you now see, was merely another comforting illusion. For in Dunwhiddle, order is not so much restored as it is replaced by a new kind of chaos, one that wears the face of the familiar and the forgotten. The ghosts are no longer content to haunt the edges of your vision. They are restless, urgent, and you are forced to wonder if you are the one haunting them, or if it is, as Agatha said, simply your turn to see. It begins subtly, as these things always do. The shapes grow bolder, no longer content to flicker in and out of existence. They now linger in your doorway, tracing the lintel with fingers that seem almost real. Their eyes, dark and hollow, hold a strange intelligence, a sense of purpose that chills more deeply than any mere specter. You do not know what they want, but you know that you can no longer ignore them. Their presence is accompanied by a change in the air itself, a prickling on your skin, a coldness that seeps into your bones. At first, you try to keep busy, to pretend that nothing has changed. But the tasks you once performed with mechanical precision now seem pointless. The woodpile grows. The dishes are scrubbed until they shine. Your floor is swept clean enough for a saint, and still they come. One evening, as the last light bleeds from the sky, you hear a voice, a whisper so faint that you might have mistaken it for the wind, if not for the way it knows your name. Jonas, it breathes, for you do, after all, have a name, even if it has rarely been of consequence. Jonas, do you remember? You freeze, heart hammering in your chest. For a long moment, you consider running, but there is nowhere to go. The voice comes again, closer now, as if spoken by someone standing just behind your shoulder. You promised, it says. You forgot. You turn, but the room is empty, save for the flutter of shadow on the far wall. The fire crackles, the lamp gutters, and the night presses against the windows with insistent fingers. You are not alone, and you know it. The next day, you find Edith at the edge of her field, staring into the middle distance. Her face is pale, drawn tight as a drum. She tells you, in a voice so low you can barely hear, that the ghosts have started to speak to her as well. They tell me stories, she confides, clutching your arm with cold, shaking fingers. Stories about their lives, about the things they lost. Some are angry, some are sad. They beg me to listen, and when I do, I see things, things I wish I could forget. You share your own experience, the voice in the darkness, the accusation in its tone. You tell her about the sense of being watched, of being called to account for promises you do not remember making. They want something from us, Edith whispers, but I do not know what it is. That night, you resolve to keep watch, not the half hearted watch of a man hoping for reassurance, but the desperate vigilance of one who knows that the only way out is through. You light every candle in your hut, build the fire high, and sit in the center of the room with your back to the wall. The hours crawl past, heavy and thick. The shadows gather at the edges, swirling like storm clouds. You see faces in the flickering light, faces you almost recognize, faces twisted by longing and regret. They speak in fragments, their voices overlapping until you cannot tell one from another. We are forgotten. Remember us. Do not leave. One of them, a boy with hollow cheeks and eyes too large for his face, steps forward. His mouth moves, but no sound escapes. He points to the well and then to you. The gesture is unmistakable. You find yourself standing, feet moving of their own accord. The cold is unbearable, sinking through your flesh, numbing your thoughts. You leave the safety of your hut and cross the silent village, drawn by an impulse you cannot resist. The well waits, silent and unchanging. The stones gleam in the moonlight, slick with dew. You kneel beside it, peering into the darkness. The water below is as still as ever, but in its depths you see shapes, flickers of movement, glimmers of faces. You realize, with a clarity sharper than any waking thought, that the well is not just a source of water. It is a door, a threshold between worlds. The dead are not simply haunting you, they are asking for something, a memory, a promise, a release. You whisper an apology, not knowing who it is for. The words feel strange in your mouth, as if they belong to someone else. When you rise, the ghosts have withdrawn. The air is lighter, the cold receding, but you know it will not last. The demands of the dead are not so easily satisfied. You return to your hut and find that the fire has burned low. You stare into the embers, replaying the night's events in your mind. You remember Agatha's words: the more you see, the harder it will be to look away. You wonder if you have crossed some invisible line, if, by acknowledging the dead, you have given them more power over you. The next morning, you are exhausted, though you have not slept. The villagers gather in the square, faces drawn and wary. It is clear from their eyes that you are not the only one who has been visited, not the only one who has heard their name spoken by voices that should not be. A new fear settles over Dunwhiddle, a fear not just of sleeplessness, nor of ghosts, but of what you may owe to those who have come before. You begin to understand that this is not merely a curse, but a reckoning. You have always thought of yourself as a man of the present. The past, for you, has been little more than a collection of aches and disappointments, useful only as a warning, never as a guide. But now, as the days in Dunwhiddle unravel with the delicate persistence of an old woman's knitting, you find yourself being dragged backward. It is not your idea. It is not even your choice. The ghosts, it seems, have grown tired of simply being seen. Now they want to be heard. And you, unfortunately, are the audience they have chosen. It begins on a night like any other, which is to say, a night stretched long and thin by the absence of sleep. You are sitting in your hut, staring into the guttering light of your last candle, when the woman appears again at your threshold. This time, she is different. She is clearer, her features sharper, though still marked by the impossible sadness you have come to know. She stands just inside your door, silent for a long moment. Then, softly, she begins to speak. "You do not remember me," she says, and her voice is neither accusation nor comfort, but a simple statement of fact. That is the way of things. You want to protest, to insist that you have never met her before in all your years. But even as you open your mouth, you are struck by a flicker of recognition, a sense that her story has been threaded through the village for longer than you have been alive. She tells you her name was Marin, though she does not expect you to recall it. She lived in Dunwhiddle long before the well was lost to memory. Hers was a life marked by hunger, loss, and the quiet perseverance of women who endure because no one bothers to ask if they would rather not. She speaks of a time when the village was smaller, the forest thicker, and the night so dark you could not see your hand in front of your face. She tells you of a famine, a winter so cold the very air seemed to freeze in your lungs. People went hungry, some did not survive. In desperation, she and a handful of others sought out the old places, springs and stones said to be older than the church itself, places that might still hold a scrap of magic. They found the well, buried beneath thorns, much as you did. "We asked for relief," Marin says. "We begged the earth for mercy, and we were answered. The well gave water that never ran dry, and for a time we flourished. but we did not understand the cost. The dead, you see, do not sleep, and when we drank, we became like them, awake, restless, unable to find peace. You listen, transfixed. You ask her why the well was not sealed, why the story was not passed down. Her answer is both simple and terrible. We forgot. That is the other gift of the well. It takes, but it also hides. The memories drift away, buried like roots beneath the soil. We left warnings, but in time, they faded. New generations made the same mistake. She pauses, looking at you with eyes that are no longer quite human. It is always the same. The living think they can bargain with the dead. The dead, if they are lucky, simply want to be remembered, but there are always those who want more. At this, you shiver. There is an edge to her words, a hint of old, festering anger. You ask what she wants from you. Her answer is not what you expect. To listen, to remember. If you do, perhaps the rest will follow. With that, she is gone, leaving only the faintest scent of earth and old smoke behind her. You sit in the darkness, uncertain whether you have been blessed or cursed with knowledge. The next day, you feel the weight of her story pressing on your shoulders. You share it with Edith and a few others, half expecting them to laugh. They do not. Instead, each has a story of their own, a dream, a whisper, a vision from another time. The miller's boy tells you of a bearded man who appears at the foot of his bed, muttering in a language he does not understand. Widow Harrington, reluctant as always to admit fear, confesses to seeing her late husband each night, standing by the fire, watching her with the patience of someone who knows eternity is a long wait. The village becomes a place of stories, old grievances, forgotten promises, lives lived and lost. The boundaries between past and present blur. You begin to see the ghosts not as threats, but as messengers, carriers of memories too heavy to bear alone. But not all the spirits are content to reminisce. One night, as you walk the path between your hut and the well, you are confronted by a figure you do not recognize. He is young, angry, and there is something wrong with his eyes, something hungry. You took what was not yours, he spits. You drank, but you did not pay. We are owed. He does not wait for your reply, but vanishes into the mist. You are left with a cold certainty. Not every story ends in forgiveness. Some debts, once incurred, cannot be easily settled. You return to Agatha, hoping for reassurance. She is waiting for you, as if she knew you would come. The old bargains are the hardest to break, she tells you. The dead want remembrance, yes, but there are always those who want more: justice, revenge, a place at your fire. She warns you not to let the angry ones into your home, to hold the line between compassion and surrender. Listen, but do not promise, she says. Remember, but do not bind yourself to their grief. They are not your past. You are only their witness. You thank her, though you are not sure you understand. As you leave her cottage, you see a line of pale faces at the edge of the wood, watching, waiting. You realize, with a sense of helpless resignation, that the ghosts are not fading. If anything, they are gathering strength, and you, whether you like it or not, are at the heart of their story now. A witness, a bearer of burdens, a man who can no longer claim to live only in the present. The well waits, as patient as ever, while the ghosts circle, their stories swirling around you like autumn leaves in a wind that will not stop. You have never considered yourself a coward, merely practical. There are those who would call you stubborn, others who would say you are simply lazy, but you have always taken pride in your ability to endure what life presents without much fuss. Still, even you have your limits. By now, you have reached them. You have listened to the stories of the dead until your head rings with their voices. You have watched the village grow more haggard, the living losing what little softness remained in their faces, replaced with a wary sharpness. Children play quietly, never straying far from their mothers. Men take to their tasks with grim silence, as if work itself might ward off the encroaching cold of the unseen. The market square, once noisy and careless, now thrums with anxious whispers, stories exchanged like currency, always in low voices, always with an eye on the dark. And you are tired of it. You are tired of the well, tired of the ghosts, tired of the endless parade of faces from a past you do not own. Above all, you are tired of being awake. It is a fatigue so deep that it aches in your bones, a hollow yearning for oblivion. You would give anything, almost anything, for a single hour of dreamless sleep. So you do what any sensible man would do. You seek a remedy. You begin with the oldest solution you know, one that predates both ghosts and wells: herbs. Dunwittle is rich in plants, and Agatha, for all her ominous pronouncements, is generous with advice. She hands you bundles of valerian, poppy, and mugwort, instructing you in their proper use. None of them will cure what ails you, she says, but you are determined to try. You boil water, steep the leaves, and drink until the bitter taste numbs your tongue. You lie in your bed, waiting for the heaviness to descend. But it never comes. Your eyes remain open, your mind unwilling to surrender. You recite prayers, old songs, even the dullest passages from St. Harold the Uninteresting, but nothing shifts. Your body is as stubbornly alert as ever, every muscle tense, every sense sharpened to a painful clarity. You are not alone in your efforts. Word spreads, as it always does, that you are seeking a cure. The miller's boy tries fasting. Edith swears by a concoction of warm milk and honey, administered by the jugful. Gilbert attempts to exhaust himself by hauling stones from one end of the village to the other, his knees creaking in protest. Widow Harrington even organizes a midnight prayer vigil, though most attendees admit afterward that their minds wandered to thoughts of bread and cabbage soup. The children, too young to know better, begin to invent games to trick themselves into drowsiness. They line up pebbles in intricate patterns, counting to numbers far beyond their years. Some curl up in their mother's arms, eyes closed tight, pretending to sleep so convincingly that for a moment you almost believe it possible. But no one sleeps. It is during one of these long, futile nights that you realize something else is missing: your dreams. It is not just sleep that has vanished, but the world of dreams themselves. You used to take comfort, now and then, in the strange landscapes your mind would wander. Now, you are trapped in the endless present, your memories sharper, but your hopes dimming. The ghosts, sensing your desperation, grow bolder. The woman, Marin, visits more frequently, her sorrow deeper, her questions more pointed. Do you not remember? She asks, over and over, her voice like wind through dead leaves. The child at her side stares up at you, wide eyed and silent. One night, another spirit appears, a boy with a bloody bandage around his head, a look of confusion etched on his face. He reaches for you, not in anger, but in pleading. Help me, he whispers, again and again, until the words sink into your heart like stones. You recoil, backing away until your shoulders press against the cold wall of your hut. You shout for the ghosts to leave you alone, to find someone else to torment. For a moment, the room is filled with silence, so thick you can taste it. Then the woman answers, her tone gentle but unyielding. We are all you have left. You called us, even if you do not remember the words. You want to argue, to insist that you are a victim, not a participant. But the truth sits heavy on your chest. You drank from the well. You disturbed the earth. Whatever bargains were struck, you are now part of them. Desperate, you turn to Agatha one last time. She regards you with weary sympathy. There is no escape from this kind of magic, she tells you. You can burn the herbs, chant the prayers, even leave the village, but the well's water is in your blood. You will carry it with you wherever you go. But there must be something, you protest, a way to undo it, to go back. Agatha shakes her head. The only way out is through. Accept the ghosts, listen to their stories, and perhaps, in time, they will let you go. You leave her cottage with nothing but a small bag of lavender and her blessing, such as it is. You scatter the lavender on your pillow, breathe in the fading scent, and lie awake, waiting for dawn. The next day, you notice changes in the village. People move more slowly, eyes shadowed, voices thin with strain. Even the animals seem to sense it. The cows low softly in their pens. The dogs bark at nothing, their fur bristling with unseen menace. The air is heavy with unspoken fears, every shadow a potential omen. As the sun sets, you find yourself drawn to the well once more. You kneel beside it, peering into the depths. This time, the water does not reflect your face. Instead, you see the faces of the dead, dozens of them, old and young, familiar and strange, all watching, all waiting. You close your eyes, whisper a prayer you barely remember, and wish fervently, desperately, that you had never found the well. But wishes, you know, are for children and fools. You open your eyes, and the dead are still there. In the end, you return to your hut, as always, the ghosts trailing behind you like a second shadow. Sleep does not come. The night passes, slow and endless, and you wonder, just for a moment, if you are awake or if this is all some fevered dream from which you will never wake. In the morning, you rise, go through the motions, and try to believe, for the sake of your neighbors, that you are enduring rather than merely surviving. But deep down, you know, there is no escaping what you have set in motion. Not for you, not for Dunwhiddle, not for the living, nor the dead. It is said that a village is like a family, except you cannot choose the members, and then everyone knows your business. In Dunwhiddle, this is doubly true. For generations, disputes have simmered over property lines, goats, and who actually invented the trick of stacking firewood so it does not collapse on your toes. But now, with sleep banished and the ghosts gathering, all the old rules are quietly collapsing. You notice it first in the little things. The market, once the closest thing Dunwhiddle had to entertainment, is now a perfunctory affair. Traders mutter greetings with the careful neutrality of prisoners exchanging news through the bars. The baker's loaves are smaller and burnt at the edges, though no one complains. There is a sense that complaints, like laughter, are relics of an easier time. Children who once darted about the square in a tangle of bare feet and shrill voices now keep to the edges, clutching at their mother's skirts or watching with wide, unblinking eyes. The restlessness has given way to suspicion. You see it in the way neighbors look at one another, eyes flicking over shoulders as if everyone might be hiding an extra shadow. Disagreements, always frequent in Dunwhiddle, where pride runs thick as the mud, flare into arguments over nothing at all. Whose dog barked at whose chickens, whose turn it is to fetch water, though no one wants it anymore. Whether the priest's Latin is truly correct or merely impressive sounding nonsense. You, for your part, try to keep out of it. The ghosts are enough trouble, but trouble has a way of finding you. Edith comes to you in the morning, eyes hollow, clutching a fistful of rosemary. She sits without asking, glancing around your hut as if searching for something just out of sight. They are getting closer, she says. Not just shadows anymore. I saw my father last night. He tried to speak, but his mouth. She shudders, and you are glad she does not finish. Gilbert is next. He storms in without knocking, face red with anger. This is your fault, he spits. If you had not gone nosing about, we would all be sleeping like proper Christians. Now look at us, like scarecrows, haunted from dusk till dawn. You are tempted to argue, but you see the tremor in his hands. Anger is easier than fear, after all. You let him vent, knowing that you could as easily be the one shouting at shadows. The children, normally immune to grown up nonsense, now move as if under a spell. They draw strange shapes in the dust, whisper to things only they can see, and sometimes vanish from their mother's sight only to be found standing in a circle around the well, silent and unmoving. The adults take to locking doors, barring shutters, burning every herb Agatha provides, but it makes no difference. The village is unraveling, and you are all too awake to miss a single thread coming loose. Arguments become more frequent. Suspicion breeds accusation. Widow Harrington blames the miller's wife for bringing bad luck. The miller's wife blames the priest for not blessing the well properly. The priest, for his part, has taken to fasting and prayer, but even he cannot banish the shadows that gather on the church steps each night. One evening, as dusk pools at the corners of the square, a commotion breaks out near the smithy. Two men are fighting, not an unusual event, but this time it is different. There is a desperation to it, a sense that they are fighting not each other, but something neither can name. You and a few others step in, separating them with more force than ceremony. When it is over, both men stand, shoulders heaving, eyes glazed with something worse than exhaustion. They were watching me, one gasps, standing at the foot of my bed. I could not move. You know what he means. Everyone does. No one tries to offer comfort. You retreat to your hut, but the atmosphere follows you inside, a miasma of fear, anger, and sorrow. The fire offers no warmth. The familiar possessions on your shelves, carved spoons, a faded scarf, a chipped mug, seem like relics from another life, belonging to someone else. You try again to seek comfort in routine. You sweep, you stack wood, you boil water. You read from your book until the words blur together, meaning nothing. You mutter to yourself, to the ghosts, to whatever gods might still be listening. The ghosts grow bolder. The woman, Marin, stands in your doorway, her face contorted by a grief you cannot share. The child, his eyes dark with accusation, tugs at your sleeve. Other figures move through your rooms, flickering at the edge of sight, brushing past with the chill of forgotten memory. Their whispers are insistent now. They speak of promises broken, of things left undone, of the hunger that comes from being unseen. Some villagers try to leave, but the roads seem to circle back, always leading home. A cart loaded with possessions is found abandoned at the edge of the forest, its owner returned on foot, dazed and empty eyed. Others talk of crossing the river at first light, but no one actually attempts it. The village is a trap of your own making, held together by the threads of a bargain struck long before any of you were born. In the square, the well sits in silence, its stones slick with moss and shadow. No one draws water, but everyone watches it, as if expecting something, someone to emerge. You gather one night with the rest, a grim assembly under the clouded sky. Edith suggests filling in the well, but the priest warns of making things worse. Agatha stands apart, saying nothing, her eyes fixed on the horizon. You all argue, then fall silent, the weight of your predicament pressing down like an extra blanket on a summer night. There is no decision, only a collective sense that you have moved past the point of solutions. That night, as you lie awake, you wonder how much longer Dunwhiddle can endure. Sleep is a memory, peace an impossibility. The ghosts grow ever nearer, their whispers threading through your thoughts until you can no longer tell your own voice from theirs. The village is changing, and you, along with everyone else, are being changed with it. There is no going back. The only way out, if there is one, must lie ahead, in the dark, among the ghosts, in the depths of a well that remembers everything the world wishes to forget. If there is one thing you have always taken for granted, it is that every place, no matter how dreary or cursed, contains within it a path away. Roads lead to crossroads, rivers to fords, and even the densest of forests has a game trail if you are patient or desperate enough. This is, as it turns out, another cherished illusion that life in Dunwhiddle is determined to disprove. You wake, if such a term still has meaning, to a morning so gray and featureless that you wonder if the sun has abandoned you altogether. The village, too, seems though hollowed out, the houses a hunched in on themselves, the fields shrouded in mist that refuses to lift. Today, you decide you will not endure another day of it. You will take the old road through the woods, past the ruined mill, and keep walking until you reach another village, another life, another story. You pack what little you have, a crust of bread, a flask, mercifully not filled from the well, a scrap of dried meat, your walking stick. You leave your hut with a note on the table, an old habit from when your wife still expected you home, though you doubt anyone will read it now. The road, once muddy and rutted, is strangely smooth, the grass bent as if many feet have passed this way before you. You take this as a good omen. The village recedes behind you, muffled and distant. You keep your eyes forward, determined not to look back. The woods are quiet, unnaturally so. No birds sing, no foxes bark. The silence grows until your own footsteps seem unbearably loud, each crunch of gravel a reminder of your solitary purpose. You walk for hours, or what feels like hours. The path winds through the trees, doubling back on itself, then straightening out again. Occasionally, you see the same twisted oak, the same fallen log, the same patch of brambles with a rusted horseshoe caught in its thorns. You are not foolish enough to ignore these signs, but neither are you willing to give up. You pick another path, strike out at a diagonal, using the sun, when it appears at all, to orient yourself. Still, the road leads you in circles. No matter which direction you choose, you find yourself returning to familiar landmarks. Once, you stumble upon a clearing you know you passed an hour ago, your own footprints fresh in the dew. You swear, loudly and at length, but the woods absorb your curses without reply. You try following the river. You have always believed water is a faithful guide, downhill to the sea, or at least to the next settlement. But the river, too, betrays you. It bends and coils, loops around fallen trees, then vanishes altogether, replaced by a boggy marsh that soaks your boots and chills your bones. At dusk, exhausted and muddy, you find yourself stowing at the edge of Dunwhiddle, the village green opening before you as if you had never left. The houses are lit from within, their windows glowing like wary eyes. The well sits in the square, silent and unchanged. You are not the only one who has tried. Edith is there, sitting on the step of her cottage, staring at a scrap of map with a look of utter defeat. The miller's boy stumbles into the square from the opposite direction, burrs in his hair, and a torn shirt as evidence of his own attempt. Went as far as the river, he says, voice flat. Followed it for hours. Ended up by the smithy. Gilbert, always stubborn, insists he made it to the old crossroads, only to find himself facing the village gate, the signpost bearing his own name carved years before. It is, you all agree, impossible. Dunwhiddle will not let you go. The boundaries are not marked by ditches or fences, but by something older, something woven into the land itself. The priest suggests, in a tone equal parts fear and awe, that it is a punishment for your collective sins. Agatha shrugs and says, some bargains bind tighter than others. You sleep, no rest, for sleep is still denied you in your own bed that night, the boundaries of your world smaller and closer than ever before. The village has become a kind of maze with invisible walls that shift and realign, always funneling you back to the well at its heart. The villagers gather more often now, not out of hope, but out of desperation. Plans are made and quickly abandoned. Some speak of trying again at first light, or waiting for a change in the weather, or burning the woods down entirely, though no one knows what good that would do. Meanwhile, the ghosts grow more numerous and more insistent. You see new faces every night. A girl with flowers braided in her hair, a bearded man with a sack over his shoulder, an old woman who sits by your hearth and hums lullabies you almost remember. Their presence is no longer confined to the hours of darkness. Now they drift through the village at all times, their pale forms half glimpsed in doorways, at wells, along the lanes. One day, as you chop wood behind your hut, a small boy appears beside you. He is impossibly thin, barefoot, his eyes so large and dark they seem to swallow the world. He watches you for a while, silent and intent. Are you lost? You ask, more out of habit than hope. He shakes his head. No, this is where I live now. He vanishes before you can ask more, but the meaning lingers. The ghosts are not just visitors. They belong here as much as you do, perhaps more. As the days pass, the sense of enclosure tightens. You find yourself walking the same routes, performing the same chores, having the same conversations. The villagers begin to avoid the square, as if afraid the well might reach out and drag them in. Agatha tells you that the boundaries will hold until the bargain is honored or broken. You cannot run from magic, she says, not the old kind. You have to face it, or you will wander these woods forever. At night, the village feels smaller still. The ghosts gather in greater numbers, their whispers louder, their presence heavier. You lie in your bed and listen to the creak of floorboards, the sigh of wind through the cracks, the distant sound of water dripping in the well. You wonder if you will ever leave Dunwhiddle again, if, perhaps, you ever truly did. By morning, you are no closer to an answer. The village wakes, or pretends to, and life goes on. But now you know, with a certainty that is both terrifying and oddly comforting. You are all in this together, bound by water, by memory, by the unbreakable circle of a story that has no exit. And somewhere, beneath the ancient stones of the well, you sense the eyes of the dead, watching and waiting, patient as time itself. By now, you are all but certain that the well lies at the root of everything. You have tried avoiding it, cursing it, and outwalking its influence, all to no avail. You have tiptoed around its presence in conversation as if refusing to speak its name would somehow loosen its grip. But the truth is undeniable. The village orbits the well as surely as moths circle a flame, drawn by a pull that is as ancient as it is inescapable. You spend your days in a daze, performing chores that have lost all meaning, and your nights in fitful, unsleeping rest. The ghosts are as much a part of the village now as the hedgerows or the muddy lanes. Some are mournful, content to linger in corners and gaze longingly at hearths and children. Others, more restless, pace the streets or crowd the square, their whispers growing sharper and more insistent with each passing night. It is Edith, as always, who brings things to a head. She arrives at your door at dusk, breathless and wild eyed, clutching a torn scrap of parchment in her hand. I found this in the church records, she says, voice trembling with a mixture of hope and dread. It speaks of the well, of something hidden, something left behind. You read the words by candlelight. The script is cramped and spidery, the language older than your grandmother's tales. It tells of a relic buried deep within the well, an object of power cursed and bound, meant to keep the restless dead at bay. The note is unsigned, but the warning is unmistakable. Disturb not the deep stone, lest the line between the worlds be thinned. The others gather quickly: Edith, Gilbert, Widow Harrington, the miller's boy, even Agatha, who nods gravely at the sight of the parchment. The decision is made in hushed, urgent tones. If there is a way to end this, to restore sleep and peace to Dunwhiddle, it lies at the bottom of the well. You approach the well in darkness, lanterns flickering in trembling hands. The square is deserted, save for your small group, though you sense the presence of the villagers watching from behind shuttered windows and the ghosts hovering at the edges, curious and expectant. The well mouth gapes wide, its stones slick with moss and the weight of centuries. The miller's boy, youngest and least likely to object, is volunteered to lower himself first. The rope creaks, and his descent is slow, punctuated by muttered curses and the occasional startled gasp as a toad or rat scurries into the shadows. You hear the splash of water, the scrape of boots against stone. After what feels like an eternity, his voice floats up from the depths. There is something here, a box. It is heavy. The rope groans again as he ties it to the object, and together you haul it up, hand over hand, muscles straining. The box is old, so old it seems more a part of the well than a separate thing. Bound in iron and carved with strange symbols, it hums faintly with a cold that bites through your gloves. Agatha examines it, her fingers tracing the lines with careful reverence. This is what binds them, she whispers. The old magic, the bargain that kept the dead from rising, the living from waking. Someone must have opened it before. That is why we are as we are now. Arguments erupt immediately. Gilbert wants to hurl the box back into the depths. Edith insists on opening it to see what lies within, while the priest mumbles prayers under his breath. You, tired of fear but not quite ready to be brave, suggest waiting for morning, hoping that daylight will bring clarity. It is Marin's voice, a whisper in your ear, colder than the autumn wind, that decides you. The box must be opened, Jonas. Only then will you know the truth of the bargain. You gather around the box, the lantern light throwing your faces into sharp relief. Agatha produces a thin iron key from her pouch, so old it is nearly worn smooth. She fits it to the lock and turns it with a click that echoes off the stones. The lid creaks open, revealing a jumble of objects: a child's toy, a coil of dark hair, a silver coin tarnished to black, a handful of teeth, and at the very bottom, a bone white stone that pulses faintly with a light from within. The air grows colder, the lantern flames guttering as if a great wind has blown through the square. As you look upon these things, the whispers of the ghosts grow louder, more urgent, more desperate. Some weep, some laugh, some beg for forgiveness in voices layered one upon the other. It is a binding, Agatha says, a tether to the world of the dead. The bargain was struck in desperation, the living offering these tokens in exchange for peace. Edith reaches for the stone, but her hand passes through it as though it were smoke. It is not meant for the living to touch, she says, voice hollow. You realize then that the well is not simply a door, but a wound, a place where the worlds bleed into each other, held in check only by the memory of what was lost and the hope of what might be restored. The group debates long into the night. Should the box be resealed, the tokens replaced? Should the stone be removed, the bargain broken? Each choice seems fraught with peril, each voice tinged with fear. At last, it is decided. The box must remain open until every ghost has told their story, every debt spoken aloud. Only then, Agatha claims, can the wound begin to heal. You replace the box at the edge of the well, the stone glowing softly in the night. The ghosts draw closer, their forms growing sharper, their voices more distinct. We remember, Marin whispers. Now you must too. As dawn breaks, the village seems suspended between worlds, caught in a breathless moment of waiting, the old magic unraveling thread by thread. You are tired, more tired than you have ever been, but there is something else now, a sense of purpose, perhaps, or the faintest glimmer of hope. You do not know what will come next, but for the first time, you feel the weight of your task and the strange, impossible comfort of being needed by the living and the dead alike. By now, there is little use in pretending. The ghosts are as real as you, as much a part of Dunwhiddle as the stones in the lanes or the smoke curling from the chimneys. Their presence no longer confines itself to the hours between dusk and dawn. Instead, it spills out into the thin daylight, pale and restless as fog. You begin to wonder, as you carry out your endless chores, whether you are the ones haunting them or they you. With the box open at the well's edge, the boundaries between worlds have grown ever thinner. The ghosts no longer flicker and fade at the edge of vision. They wander the lanes openly now, brushing past you with the chill of forgotten dreams. You see Marin each morning, standing by the garden with the child at her side. She greets you with a grave nod, as though acknowledging a neighbor she expects to see for eternity. The other villagers try to carry on as before, but everything feels inverted, as though the village itself has become a place of waking nightmares. People speak in whispers. Children cling to their mothers, who in turn keep their eyes down and their doors bolted. Even the dogs, those traditional skeptics of all things supernatural, whine at corners and refuse to cross the square after dark, or after dawn for that matter. You notice that the less you sleep, the sharper the visions become. At first, you could convince yourself that the apparitions were mere tricks of light or mind, but now you see faces, dozens of them, each with a story to tell, each expecting something you are unable or unwilling to give. Some stand in silence, watching you with unreadable expressions. Others mutter to themselves, or repeat snatches of song, or weep into hands that seem more shadow than flesh. Edith comes to you one morning, face drawn and eyes ringed with darkness. I see them in the daylight now, she whispers. They follow me from the well to the garden and back again. They watch as I weed the carrots. I asked one what she wanted, and she only shook her head as if I should already know. You nod in sympathy. You have stopped asking what they want. The answers, when they come, are more confusing than comforting. Some spirits plead for forgiveness, others for remembrance, others still for some act of restitution that is lost to history. Marin's story is just one among many, and you are forced to admit that you cannot bear the weight of all these regret alone. The mood in the village shifts with the lengthening of your sleepless days. People begin to quarrel with a new urgency, their tempers frayed by exhaustion and fear. The miller's boy, once cheerful and lazy, snaps at his mother for nothing at all. Widow Harrington and the priest argue in the square, voices raised until the ghosts gather around them in a silent, expectant circle. It is as if the whole of Dunwhiddle is fraying, coming undone at the edges. One afternoon, as you chop wood, a pale hand reaches out from behind the stack. You jump, dropping your axe, only to find yourself face to face with a young girl, no older than 8, her eyes wide and sorrowful. I lost my doll, she says. Can you help me find it? You stammer a reply, but she has already vanished, leaving behind only the sense of a task you have already failed to complete. The box at the well becomes a kind of shrine. Villagers bring offerings, tokens from lost loved ones, mementos they hope will appease the spirits or help them find rest. A lock of hair, a battered spoon, a ribbon faded to gray. Agatha presides over these rituals, silent and watchful, her hands never quite touching the tokens. The stories must be told, she reminds you. If not, the wound will never heal. The telling of stories becomes a daily ritual. Each evening, as the village gathers by the well, the ghosts draw near, their forms growing clearer in the lantern light. One by one, Villagers speak aloud the names of their dead, recounting tales of kindness or regret, confessing secrets long buried. The air is thick with memory, each word weaving another thread in the fragile tapestry that holds the village together. You too are called to speak. You tell Marin's story as best you remember it, adding your own apologies where you can. You recount the tale of the girl and her lost doll, the boy with the bandaged head, the old woman humming lullabies. Each story seems to lessen the tension in the air, if only for a moment, but there are always more ghosts waiting their turn. As days pass, the visions intensify. The dead begin to visit even those who have not drunk from the well, as if drawn by the gravity of so much sorrow. You see strangers among the ghosts now, faces from other villages, other times, all pulled to Dunwhiddle by the open box, the wound at the heart of your world. One night, as you stand by the well, you see a figure you do not recognize, a man tall and gaunt, with eyes like burning coals. He does not join the others, but stands apart, watching with a hunger that makes your skin crawl. You mention him to Agatha, who only nods. Not all spirits come for rest, she warns. Some are drawn by what they can take, not what they have lost. The next morning, the first true signs of fear appear. The miller's boy refuses to leave his house, convinced that something waits for him at the edge of the woods. Edith locks her doors and hangs every protective charm she can find, though the ghosts pass through them as easily as light through a window. The priest loses his voice, whether from overuse or dread, and spends his days pacing the church, muttering prayers to himself. You feel the world tightening around you, each sleepless day sharpening the divide between what is real and what is not. The boundaries that once kept the dead at bay have collapsed. The village is now a crossroads, a place where the living and the dead must somehow learn to share the same narrow lanes. But in the midst of all this fear and confusion, you also sense something else, a growing fatigue among the ghosts themselves. Some begin to fade, their forms growing fainter with each story told, each token offered, each apology spoken aloud. Others linger, but seem less angry, less urgent, as if some unspoken need has been answered. The days stretch on, each one a waking dream, each night a trial you endure only because there is no alternative. But somewhere, deep inside, you feel a change, a loosening, a softening of the wound. Perhaps you think, the end is not so far away after all. Yet you also know, with the clarity of the perpetually awake, that the worst may still be to come. The gaunt man with the coal eyes remains, patient and watchful, and the stone in the box pulses with a light that has not dimmed, not even once. You gather yourself for what is coming, knowing that, like every true story, this one will demand more of you before it is through. By now, Dunwhiddle is a place defined more by shadows than substance. The lines between day and night, living and dead, have blurred so thoroughly that the villagers scarcely bother to pretend otherwise. The well is the center of everything, and yet nothing. It has become both a warning and a promise, an old scar that refuses to heal. Each morning, you find yourself surprised not to be alone when you step outside, surprised even to see the world at all. The ghosts remain. Their numbers no longer grow, but neither do they dwindle. You sense, with each sleepless sunrise, that some are lingering not because they must, but because the village is now the only place where their stories might yet be remembered. The rituals of memory, offerings at the box, the nightly recitations, have become as regular as prayers, though you suspect fewer prayers are being offered now. Faith in the old ways, like faith in new remedies, is wearing thin. There is tension in the air, something brittle and electric. Tempers fray quickly. People snap at each other over nothing, voices rising for no reason except to remind themselves they are still alive. Arguments that would once have burned themselves out over a tankard of ale now spiral into accusations and threats. You notice that even Agatha seems tired. She watches the proceedings with hooded eyes, offering advice only when pressed. Edith's hands shake as she ties protective charms to her lintel. The miller's boy, once content to wander, now paces like a caged animal, jumping at every flicker of movement. Even Gilbert, who has always considered himself the village's backbone, avoids the square, muttering to himself about the folly of meddling with things best left alone. It is Edith, again, who insists on action. We cannot go on like this, she declares one sleepless evening, standing in the center of the square with her back straight, chin high. We are fraying, and the village will not hold. If we do not act, there will be nothing left. No Dunwhiddle, no peace, only stories told by strangers who never lived them. A few brave souls gather around her: Widow Harrington, the miller's boy, even the priest, looking more gaunt and desperate than ever. They press you to join, and though you would rather hide in your hut until the ghosts themselves give up, you find yourself drawn into the circle, if only for lack of anywhere better to be. A plan is proposed, if it can be called that. You will gather everyone, living and dead, and try to find a way to break the cycle, to ask what the spirits want, to offer, together, what apologies and remembrances you can. Agatha, when asked, nods slowly. It is worth trying. Perhaps the dead need to know we remember them. Perhaps we must all, living and dead alike, admit what has been lost. That evening, the square fills. Word has spread, as word always does in Dunwhiddle, and soon even the most reluctant villagers emerge from their shuttered homes. The ghosts, as if sensing the change, gather too, their forms clearer than you have ever seen, faces solemn, patient, watchful. For the first time, there is no pretense. You see neighbors look directly at the spirits hovering by their sides, recognize old friends or lost relatives, or else meet the eyes of strangers whose names have been forgotten. The air shivers with anticipation. Edith steps forward, voice strong despite the tremor in her hands. We do not know how to mend this. We do not know what you want, but we are here. Speak to us. Let us remember. There is a silence, heavy and expectant, broken only by the sighing wind. Then, slowly, voices rise, some living, some dead, some barely more than a breath. Stories spill forth, confessions of wrongs never righted, promises made and broken, regrets harbored for years or lifetimes. You speak too, though the words come hard, telling Marin's story, apologizing for what was forgotten, for what could not be changed. The ghosts listen. Some smile, some weep, some drift closer, their forms growing so clear that you can almost see the color of their eyes. Marin nods as you speak, the child at her side clutching her hand. Others press forward. An old woman hums a lullaby. A young man tips an invisible hat. A boy tugs at his mother's skirt. There is no grand revelation, no surge of magic to close the wound in the world. But as the stories end, you sense a shift, a loosening, a lessening of the pressure that has held the village in its grip. Some of the ghosts seem lighter, more at peace. A few even vanish, fading into the air like mist and sunlight. Not all, though. The gaunt man with coal dark eyes remains at the edge of the crowd, his expression hard and hungry. Others, too, linger, their faces pinched with sorrow or anger. The old magic has deep roots, and not every story can be untangled in a single night. But for a moment, just a moment, Dunwhiddle feels like a village again. People touch hands, exchange hesitant smiles, even laugh, though the sound is thin and strange. The living remember the dead, and the dead in turn begin to remember themselves as more than wounds and regrets. Agatha turns to you as the crowd begins to disperse. "It is not finished," she says quietly, "but it is a beginning. The wound will not heal overnight, nor will every ghost find rest. Some bargains, once made, echo for generations." You know she is right. As the villagers drift back to their homes, as the ghosts recede into the shadows, you sense that the hardest part is still to come. There are debts to settle, truths to speak, wounds to bind. The well, the box, the stone, all are still there, waiting. You lie in your bed that night, still unable to sleep, but for the first time in weeks, the dark feels less heavy. There is hope in it now, thin as dawn and just as uncertain. The village is still here, and so are you. The dead are not gone, but neither are they alone, and perhaps that, for the moment, is enough. There is a curious energy in Dunwhiddle, a restlessness born not just of sleeplessness, but of anticipation. The gathering in the square has left its mark. You see it in the villagers' eyes, wary, yes, but also expectant, as if all are waiting for something they cannot name. Even the ghosts seem caught up in this uneasy suspense, drifting less and watching more, their faces sharpened by hope or dread. You wake, or, more accurately, get up from where you have lain pretending to sleep, with the sense that something is shifting. The air is thick with the scent of rain and old earth, as though the village itself is holding its breath. Edith comes to you, her face pale but determined. "We need to find a way to finish it," she says without preamble, clutching a faded book to her chest. We have remembered. We have apologized, but it is not enough. Some of them, she glances over her shoulder at the silent figures crowding the lane, will not leave until the bargain is broken. You do not bother to ask how she knows. Dunwhiddle has become a place where certainty springs from nowhere, where dreams have been replaced by instructions that arrive as if whispered by the wind. The book is an old one, older than any you have seen, its cover cracked and brittle, its pages yellowed to the color of candlelight. Edith explains she found it in the church loft, beneath a broken pew and a pile of ancient hymnals. I could not read most of it, she admits, but there are passages in the old tongue and pictures of the well, of offerings, of rituals. You gather the others in Agatha's cottage. It is cramped, the shelves overflowing with jars and bundles, the air heavy with the smell of sage and smoke. The miller's boy reads what little he can of the book, stumbling over the unfamiliar words. The priest, who has spent his life insisting there is only one true way to pray, listens without protest, as if willing to try anything now. The ritual, as best you can piece together, is both simple and impossible. The villagers must gather by the well, bringing with them tokens of remembrance, stones for those who have died, water for those who remain, a single thread from each household to be knotted together. At the well's edge, these offerings are to be named and placed in the old box. Then, in the presence of living and dead alike, the oldest among you is to recite the binding words, a plea for peace and the closing of the breach. The instructions are maddeningly vague about the consequences. If the debt is accepted, rest will return, the book says. If not, the night shall remain open and the living wander as ghosts. This strikes you as unhelpful, but no one offers a better alternative. The village prepares in grim earnest. People fetch stones from graves and rivers, fill jars with water, search out scraps of thread and bits of fabric from every chest and cupboard. There are arguments over what counts as a proper offering, but Agatha settles most disputes with a sharp word or a look that brooks no nonsense. The day of the ritual arrives, and Dunwhiddle is more silent than you have ever known it. The square fills as dusk falls, each villager clutching their token, each ghost hovering nearby, some eager, some fearful, all attentive. The well sits at the center, the old box open beside it, the pulsing stone at the bottom still glowing softly. You, by some cruel logic, are chosen to speak the words. You found the well, Edith reminds you. It began with you. Let it end with you. As the sun sinks, you all gather. The tokens are placed in the box, each one named aloud. For Marin, who was forgotten, for Peter, who was lost, for Ruth, who never came home. You place your own offering, a smooth river stone worn by time and thumb, on the pile. The villagers tie the threads together, their hands clumsy with exhaustion and nerves. The knot is awkward, but it holds. You stand by the well, book in trembling hands, the crowd, living and dead, pressing close. You clear your throat, recite the old words as best you can, the syllables unfamiliar, the meaning lost to time. The language is heavy, more feeling than sense, but you pour into it everything you have: sorrow, regret, longing for peace. The world holds its breath. The air grows colder, sharper, as if a storm is about to break. Then the ghosts begin to move. Some step forward, placing their own hands, shadow on flesh, over the box, over the stone, over the threads. Mirren is first, her touch gentle as rain. The others follow: the boy with the bandaged head, the old woman, the child with the lost doll. They press their memories into the offerings, their faces softening, eyes shining with something that might be forgiveness or release. The light from the stone pulses, brightens, then dims. The box seems to breathe, sighing with the weight of all that has been given. Agatha murmurs a final blessing, her voice barely audible. Let the old wound heal, let rest return. For a moment, nothing happens. Then slowly, the ghosts begin to fade, not abruptly, not in a rush, but gently, as if drifting into sleep. Some vanish altogether, others linger, their forms growing fainter, their voices softer. You stand there, heart pounding, waiting for some sign that it is over. The villagers are silent, staring at the well, at the box, at each other. Night falls, deep and dark, but for the first time in what feels like a lifetime, it brings with it a sense of finality, a pause, a promise of something different. You do not know if it has worked, you do not know what comes next, but you feel, for the first time in many nights, the first true stirrings of weariness, not the frantic exhaustion of sleeplessness, but the gentle tug of real, possible sleep. You dare not hope, but you cannot help it. As you walk home, the square emptying behind you, you whisper a silent promise to remember, to hold the stories close, to honor what was lost, to never again take sleep or peace for granted. And as you lie down that night, for the first time in memory, your eyes begin to grow heavy. The ritual is not a single moment, but an unfolding, long, slow, and difficult, like everything else in Dunwhiddle. That night, after the offerings are laid and the old words spoken, no miracle occurs. There is no thunderclap, no sudden peace. The air is thick with anticipation, but also with a peculiar dread. It is as if you have called a meeting, and now everyone, living and dead, is waiting for someone else to speak first. The villagers linger in the square, not quite believing it is over. Some, too tired to care, shuffle back to their houses. Others remain, gathered around the well in small knots, clutching the remains of their tokens, eyes wide and searching. Edith paces in restless circles. The priest sits on the edge of the square, hands clasped, murmuring prayers that sound less like pleas to heaven than arguments with himself. You do not return home. Instead, Ted, you stay near the well, watching as the box sits in the lamplight, its contents pulsing faintly with a glow that is neither warm nor cold, neither hope nor warning. The ghosts, too, remain. Many have faded, gone, or at least grown faint as fog at sunrise, but others are more present than ever. They circle the well, faces pale and expectant, drawn by the old magic and the promise of release. It is then that the resistance begins. At first, it is subtle. The air grows heavier, and you feel the press of invisible eyes on your skin. The miller's boy, already trembling, bolts from the square, muttering about voices that tug at his thoughts. Widow Harrington, always practical, tries to herd everyone back inside, but finds her own feet rooted to the stones. The gaunt man with the cold dark eyes steps forward. Unlike the other ghosts, he is not softened by memory, nor warmed by forgiveness. He is unchanged, cold, watchful, and now unmistakably angry. His presence is like a winter wind, sharp, raw, and full of threat. You think this will be enough, he says, voice echoing across the square. A few stones, a few tears, some mumbled words and regrets. The villagers draw closer together, some clutching charms, others clutching each other. Agatha steps forward, staff in hand, her chin lifted. This is what the bargain requires. This is what the old stories say. He laughs, a hollow sound. Stories, bargains. Do you know how many times this has been tried? Do you know how many promises were broken? No one answers, no one can. You feel, for the first time, a tremor of true fear, not just for yourself, but for Dunwhiddle, for the old women and the children and the men who never asked for any of this. The gaunt man turns his eyes on you. You opened the box. You let us in. You would see us sent away again, unheard, unavenged. I would see us all at peace, you manage, though your voice is thin, barely more than a whisper. He steps closer. Then there must be reckoning. Not every debt can be paid with memory alone. Other ghosts begin to stir, some murmuring in agreement, others backing away, faces twisted with old grief. You see Marin standing at the edge, the child at her side. Her face is sorrowful, but resolute. It does not have to be like this, she says, softly, but clearly. There is another way. Listen to us. Let us tell the rest of our stories. Bear witness to what was done and what was lost. The gaunt man recoils, his expression contorted with anger. And if memory is not enough, if pain demands more than words, Agatha's voice cuts through the confusion. The old magic is not only about bargains and vengeance, it is about truth. The stories must be told. The truth must be known. That is the only way forward. The villagers look to you. Of course they do. It began with you, after all. It falls to you to decide. You nod, throat dry. We will listen, you say. We will remember all of it. The ritual resumes, but now it is different. The stories told are not gentle remembrances, but confessions and reckonings. People speak of old betrayals, of wrongs never righted. The ghosts, too, speak now, of injustice, of pain, of lives ended too soon or too cruelly. The air grows thick with the weight of their words. Some villagers weep, others grow silent, faces shuddered. Not all ghosts are satisfied. Some rage at the well, at the living, at the world that moved on without them. The gaunt man is the loudest. his accusations sharp as knives. You cannot mend what you have broken. You cannot wash away blood with tears. The priest tries to respond, but his voice falters. Edith speaks quietly to Marin, her words lost in the wind. Agatha holds the ritual together by force of will, reciting lines from the old book, urging both sides to speak and be heard. And through it all, the well glows, the box pulses, the stone at its heart throbs with a light that seems both hungry and sated. The ritual drags into the night. Some villagers collapse where they stand, too weary to move. The ghosts swirl and dance, some growing gentler, others more fierce. The miller's boy clings to your arm, eyes wide, whispering that he sees things he wishes he could forget. At the edge of the crowd, Marin stands with the child, watching you. Her eyes meet yours, and you feel, for a moment, the full weight of all that has passed: loss, regret, memory, hope. She nods as if to say, not yet, but soon. As dawn approaches, the ritual winds down. The stories are not finished, but they are spoken. The gaunt man, for all his fury, seems less substantial now, thinner, less anchored. He glares at you, then turns away, fading into the pre-dawn mist. You and the others gather what remains of your strength. The village is silent once more, but this silence is different, not expectant, but exhausted. The box sits by the well, still pulsing with its strange light, waiting. You wonder if you have done enough, if memory is, after all, sufficient, if there is any peace to be found. But you also sense that something has changed. The wound is not healed, but it has begun to close. The living and the dead have spoken, and for the first time, the story feels nearer to an ending. You stumble home, body aching, mind numb. You lie down in your bed, not sure if you will sleep, not sure what dreams might come if you do. But for now, for this small hour, the village is quiet, and the ghosts, at least for now, are listening. Dawn arrives in Dunwhiddle with the weariness of a world that has not slept for a generation. The villagers do not rise so much as stagger upright, blinking at a light that seems, for the first time in months, faintly forgiving. Yet forgiveness is not the order of the day. The air crackles with the unspent energy of stories told and pain confessed, but no one knows what to do next. You gather again by the well, as you have so many times before. The square is quieter now, the crowd smaller, thinner. Some have locked themselves inside. Others simply wander, lost in thought or memory. The box sits open by the ancient stones, the pale light from the stone inside fluttering like a candle about to go out. The ritual has exhausted everyone, living and dead alike, but there is a sense, unmistakable, dreadful, that something remains unfinished. It is Agatha who names it first. She stands in the square, staff planted in the mud, her old voice carrying through the morning hush. The stories are told, but the bargain is not closed. The wound is bound, but it is not healed. She looks to you, then to the priest, then to the well itself. There must be a reckoning, a sacrifice. There always was, in the old tales. A murmur passes through the villagers. You see dread on every face, but also a certain resignation. Even the ghosts seem to draw back, wary, as if the weight of the moment presses upon them too. Edith finds you at the edge of the square, her face drawn, eyes red from too many sleepless nights. "Did you know?" she whispers. "Did you sense it would come to this?" You shake your head. "I only hoped we could end it with memory, with words." You do not say aloud, that you have known for days, since the first ghost called your name, since the ritual failed to close the wound, that some old magic always demands a cost. The gaunt man returns, more substantial than ever in the dawn light, though he casts no shadow. His voice is quieter now, but more dangerous for it. "You have named the debts, but who will pay them? Who will take the burden so the rest can rest?" Agatha nods. "That is the way, a life for a life, or, if the spirits are merciful, the willingness to offer is enough." No one volunteers at first. There is a long, ugly silence, broken only by the restless shuffling of feet and the faint, sorrowful murmurs of the ghosts. The miller's boy looks to his mother, then away. Widow Harrington clutches her knitting so tightly the yarn snaps. Gilbert glowers at the ground, muttering curses too soft to hear. The priest, at last, raises a trembling hand. "I am the oldest," he says, his voice wavering. "It should be me. I have shepherded this flock. I have failed them. Perhaps this is the only way to serve them now." Agatha shakes her head gently. "It must be given freely, not out of duty. The old stories are clear. Sacrifice chosen, not merely endured." Debate breaks out, quiet but intense. Some urge the priest to accept his burden. Others argue for drawing lots. Still others claim, desperately, that perhaps the cost has already been paid in suffering, in sleeplessness, in sorrow. Yet the box remains open, the stone pulsing, the wound not yet closed. The ghosts gather at the edge of the square, watching in silence. You see Marin among them, her face grave, the child clinging to her hand. The gaunt man waits, patient, as if certain that the living will eventually find their way to the truth of things. You wonder, as you stand there, whether you might volunteer. You found the well, you drank first, you called the others. Perhaps it is only fitting that you should be the one to close the circle. But as the thought rises, you see the faces of your neighbors, tired, frightened, hopeful, and something in you rebels against easy answers. Edith steps forward, her voice trembling but strong. "If it must be, let it be me. I have no children. I am not young, but I am not the oldest. Perhaps I am simply tired enough." She manages a small, wry smile. The priest protests. The miller's boy weeps openly. Agatha stands silent. The debate turns to pleading. Everyone is exhausted, frightened of loss, unwilling to lose another member of their small, stubborn community. But the well does not care for arguments. The box waits. At last, you speak, because no one else will. "We have all paid," you say. "We have all lost. Maybe what matters is that we are willing. Maybe what matters is that we come together now, not as victims, but as those who remember and choose. There is silence. The villagers, the ghosts, even the restless wind seem to pause. Then, softly, Marin speaks from among the spirits. We do not seek more suffering, only remembrance, only that you understand the cost and choose not to forget again. The gaunt man scowls, but the others, dozens of them now, nod, their forms shimmering in the morning light. Agatha raises her staff. Let us offer ourselves, all of us, in witness and memory. Let the well know that the debt is known, the pain shared, the sacrifice offered freely, even if it is only the promise to remember. The box glows brighter. The stone's light flickers, then steadies, as if testing your resolve. The villagers step forward, one by one, each placing a hand on the old box, speaking their names, offering themselves not in body, but in spirit, as bearers of the burden, keepers of the story. You do the same, feeling a strange warmth, the first you have felt in weeks. The ghosts join you. Marin is first, followed by the boy, the old woman, the lost children. The gaunt man stands apart, watching, reluctant, but no longer so certain. You sense something shift. The wound, still raw, begins to knit itself, not with magic, but with memory, with willingness, with the slow, difficult acceptance of what has been lost. The dawn brightens. For the first time, you feel the promise of rest, not just for you, but for everyone. The ritual is not finished, but the sacrifice has been made, not in blood, but in truth, not in one, but in all. You stand together, living and dead, in the cold light of morning, uncertain but united, awaiting whatever comes next. If you ever doubted the capacity of a village to turn any crisis into an argument, Dunwhiddle puts those doubts firmly to rest. For what else could happen after a night of rituals and a dawn heavy with the scent of old magic, but a very public and very human debate over who, precisely, should be the one to bear the final cost? You would think, after all you have endured together, that the spirit of unity would persist. But unity, like spring weather and honest tax collectors, is a fragile thing in these parts. And so, after the ritual of witness and offering, the villagers, utterly drained, immediately splinter into camps of opinion and accusation. It begins in a hush, with Edith's trembling offer to sacrifice herself still hanging in the air. The priest, trembling as well, insists that it is his duty. Widow Harrington, in a rare fit of outrage, proclaims that the whole affair is the fault of men and their endless meddling, and suggests, not entirely in jest, that perhaps all men of the village could solve the problem together by marching into the well at once. This earns her a sharp look from Gilbert and a snort from the miller's boy, who reminds everyone that he only fetched water because his mother told him to. Arguments blossom and multiply. Old feuds resurface, fueled now by sleeplessness and fear. Who stole whose chickens? Who borrowed whose plow and never returned it? who neglected to mention the old legends about wells and curses in the first place. It was, in its way, almost comforting, a return to the familiar rhythms of village life, albeit with more ghosts eavesdropping on every word. The ghosts themselves watch from the margins, their faces unreadable. Some seem amused, as though recognizing an old play performed by new actors. Others are plainly distressed, shaking their heads, or drifting away as the living quarrel and blame. You, being at the center of it all, are quickly drawn into the storm. It was your curiosity, Jonas, that started this, Gilbert reminds you, voice harsh, but not without a note of desperate hope. Hope that if he shouts loudly enough, he might shout the problem out of existence. Agatha remains the one steady presence, her staff thumping against the stones as she makes her way from group to group. She reminds the priest that the gods have no interest in martyrs, chides Edith for her martyrdom, scolds the miller's boy for crying and not acting, and at last tells Widow Harrington that more men have been lost to sharp tongues than to sharp swords. The debate soon turns to bartering. Who is worth more to the village? Who is more likely to be missed? Who is old enough that their absence would be only a mild inconvenience? It would be funny if it were not so painfully earnest. For every selfless volunteer, there are two eager to see someone else step forward. The priest, perhaps in a final attempt at dignity, proposes a lottery, his hand trembling as he tears scraps of parchment for the drawing. The crowd murmurs, a low, anxious chorus. Even the ghosts seem to lean in, their forms flickering as if caught by a sudden wind. Before the lottery can proceed, Marin steps forward, her ghostly presence silencing the square. This is not how it must be, she says, her voice soft but unyielding. No sacrifice forced by fear will ever heal the wound. It must be chosen freely and in love, or not at all. This, as it turns out, solves nothing. If anything, it redoubles the arguments, as each person insists they are both the bravest and, simultaneously, the most essential. You watch the scene unfold with a kind of numb wonder. Never in your life have you seen the people of Dunwhiddle so united in their refusal to unite. As the sun climbs higher, the debate grows heated. Voices rise, tempers flare, tears are shed. Edith stands her ground, refusing to budge from her earlier offer. The priest, stubborn to the end, holds the scraps of parchment as if they are the keys to salvation. Gilbert tries, unsuccessfully, to convince everyone that Widow Harrington would make a fine and noble sacrifice. The miller's boy, in a rare show of independence, declares that perhaps it is time for the young to shoulder the burdens of the old. The ghosts are not unmoved. Some draw nearer, whispering to the living, urging mercy, patience, memory. Others seem on the verge of intervening, their forms shimmering with the possibility of something both terrible and beautiful. At last, Agatha raises her staff and brings it down with a crack that silences even the gaunt man's simmering rage. Enough, she says, voice ringing with finality. This is not a market, nor a battlefield. If the bargain is to be fulfilled, It will not be by choosing who is least loved or least useful. The well does not care for arguments, it cares for truth. You must choose freely and together, or the wound will never close. A hush falls over the square. The villagers look at one another, truly look, for the first time in weeks. You see in their faces not just fear, but weariness, longing, and the slow dawning understanding that some burdens are not meant to be placed on one pair of shoulders. It is then, in the exhausted quiet, that you step forward, not because you are the bravest, nor the wisest, but because you are simply ready. If a choice must be made, let it be made now, you say, but let us all bear it together in memory and in hope. If one is chosen, let the rest not forget the price. Marin nods, her eyes shining. Remember, and you will not have to pay again. You are not sure if she is promising forgiveness or only warning of what will come if the lesson is forgotten. As evening falls, the villagers gather in a silent circle, hands joined. The ghosts surround you, luminous and attentive. The priest prays softly. Edith squeezes your hand. Agatha murmurs a blessing in the old tongue. No one knows what will happen next. No one can say if this is enough. But for the first time, it feels as if you are facing the darkness not as separate souls, but as one. Evening settles over Dunwhiddle like a great old blanket, heavy and full of memories, neither comforting nor cruel, but simply inescapable. The villagers form a ragged circle in the square, hands joined, shoulders touching. For the first time in all these endless, sleepless weeks, there is something like stillness. No one shouts, no one argues. There is only the waiting, the soft shuffling of feet on worn stones, the hush that falls when everyone is equally afraid and equally resolved. At the center, beside the well, stands the box, its contents gleaming in the lantern light, its stone pulsing softly, as if it, too, is waiting for an answer. The ghosts form a circle just outside your own, silent witnesses, their faces calm or hopeful or merely weary, as if they, too, are tired of all this unfinished business. The gaunt man hovers at the very edge of the crowd, arms folded, expression unreadable, as though still unconvinced that any bargain will satisfy the debt. The moment for decision comes without warning, no sign from the sky, no word from the well. It comes as a simple silence, deeper than any before, as if the world itself is holding its breath. You realize, as you stand there, that there is no grand solution. There is only the choice to act and the willingness to carry the weight, whatever it may be. You step forward. You are not entirely surprised that it is you. In the end, you speak softly, your voice carrying across the square, not by strength, but by the hush that has fallen over everything else. If sacrifice is needed, I offer myself, you say, but not in anger and not to buy forgetfulness. Let it be a promise that we will remember, that we will carry these stories not just as burdens, but as part of what makes us whole. The villagers do not protest this time. Edith nods, her hand still entwined with yours. The priest bows his head. Agatha, standing closest, places a hand on your shoulder. It must be freely given, she whispers, as much to the watching ghosts as to you. Marin steps out from the spectral circle, the child at her side. She lays a ghostly hand atop yours. It feels like a memory of warmth, a thing lost, but somehow not gone. Thank you, she says, her voice both here and far away. We ask only to be remembered. You kneel by the box, the stone's glow washing over your hands. It seems to throb in time with your heartbeat. You think of all that has passed, the first sleepless night, the voices in the shadows, the stories that demanded telling, the faces you had never known and now will never forget. You realize, with a sort of tired gratitude, that you are no longer afraid. You place your hand on the stone. The world contracts to a single point of contact, cold, bright, impossibly ancient. You feel the presence of the dead pressing close, not as threats, but as witnesses. The villagers gather tighter, the ghosts leaning in. Even the gaunt man seems to pause, the anger draining from his face, replaced by something like sorrow. You close your eyes. You do not speak any incantation. The words this time are not necessary. The offering is made in silence, and the silence is answer enough. For a moment, there is nothing, no sound, no light, no weight, only the memory of all that has been carried, and the hope that it might be set down, if only for a little while. Then you feel it, a rush of warmth, sudden and overwhelming, sweeping through the square like a breath of spring. The air shivers, the ground seems to sigh, and the stone in the box flares with a brilliance so pure it blinds you. The ghosts rise, not in anger, but in a dance, circling the well, hands joined, faces lifted to the sky. Some begin to fade, their edges softening into mist. Others, Marin among them, linger a moment longer, mouths moving in silent thanks. One by one, the spirits depart. The miller's boy sobs openly. Edith weeps beside you. Even the priest wipes at his eyes, unashamed. The gaunt man steps forward, his anger gone. He bows his head, touching a hand to the stone, and then, with a shudder, dissolves into the dawn. You are left kneeling by the well, the box empty save for a faint trace of light. Agatha helps you to your feet. It is done, she says, voice soft with relief. For now, it is enough. The villagers gather around you, not cheering, not weeping, but simply together, united in fatigue, in relief, in the shared knowledge of what has been lost and what has been restored. The sky above is pale, streaked with the first true colors of morning you have seen in weeks. You look around and see not just faces, but lives, stories that will go on, changed forever by what has passed. There is no magic left, only the memory of it, and the solemn, heavy promise that you will not forget. As the first rays of sun spill over the rooftops, you feel something strange and wonderful. The true, bone deep ache of tiredness, the old and honest desire for sleep. For a moment, no one moves. The village, the well, the world itself seems to breathe out, as if relieved at last. You do not know what dreams will come or what the future holds, but you know that you have paid the price, and this time you will remember. The morning after, if it can be called that, arrives with an unfamiliar quiet. You lie in your bed, unsure whether you have woken or are simply dreaming with your eyes open. For the first time in memory, your mind feels heavy, weighted by a drowsiness as gentle as a lullaby. It is not exhaustion, nor the frantic restlessness of too many sleepless nights. It is something deeper, slower, a sense that the world itself is ready to let you go, if only for a little while. You savor the feeling, not rushing to rise. Outside your window, Dunwhiddle is transformed. The air smells of rain and newly turned earth. The sun creeps cautiously over the rooftops, illuminating a village that is at last at rest. The square is empty. The well sits, ordinary and quiet, its stones washed clean by the morning. There is no glow, no box, no shadows at the edge of sight. The ghosts, for once, are absent, or perhaps simply at peace. When you finally do leave your bed, the world feels unfamiliar in the most delightful way. You stretch and yawn, marveling at the simple pleasure of a body that remembers how to relax. Your back aches in all the usual places, and your knees complain as you shuffle to the door. You are, in short, gloriously, wonderfully ordinary. The rest of the village emerges by degrees. Doors open, faces peer out, and for a moment everyone stands blinking in the sunlight, as if unsure whether it is safe to believe. Then, quietly, a new routine begins. The chickens are fed, the cows milked, the garden beds weeded. The children, their faces smudged and sleepy, trail after their mothers in a daze. Edith appears on her stoop, eyes red but shining, waving as she always has, though this time the gesture feels more like a beginning than an end. There is no great celebration, no feast or festival. There is only the gentle hush of relief, the slow gathering of neighbors who have weathered something vast together. You join them in the square, where Agatha stands beside the well, her staff planted firmly in the earth. The priest offers a brief prayer, his words less urgent, more grateful. The miller's boy, for once, is silent, his hands busy mending a broken cartwheel. Widow Harrington distributes stale biscuits with something almost like cheer. No one speaks much of what happened, not at first. The stories linger, but they are softer now, the rough edges smoothed by the passage of sleep. Occasionally, you catch someone glancing toward the well, a flicker of old fear or sadness in their eyes, but it passes quickly. The wound in the world has not disappeared, but it has faded into a scar, a reminder rather than a threat. In the weeks that follow, Dunwhiddle settles back into its rhythms. The market returns, a little quieter, a little kinder. Arguments, when they come, are about crops or weather or who forgot to pay the baker, not about who must bear the burden of magic. The children play in the lanes, their laughter timid at first, then growing stronger as the days lengthen. You too Find your own patterns again. You mend your fence, plant a new row of beans, take long walks in the woods where the shadows are just shadows. Sometimes, late at night, you sit by your fire and remember the faces of the dead, Marin, the gaunt man, the lost children, and whisper a silent greeting just in case. Sometimes you feel their presence, faint and friendly, as if watching over you rather than haunting you. Sleep, when it comes, is as ordinary and as miraculous as rain in spring. You welcome it now, letting yourself drift, trusting that you will wake again to a world that is a little less broken, a little more whole. There are nights when you dream, not of ghosts, but of simple things: bread baking, rivers flowing, sunlight on your face. You wake with the memory of peace, fragile but real. The well remains, a silent sentinel in the center of Dunwhiddle. Some avoid it still, others nod as they pass. A few even draw water when they must. No one speaks of curses or bargains or old wounds, but everyone, in their own way, remembers. You remember too, not as a burden, but as a promise to tell the stories, to honor the past, to greet the future without fear. The ghosts have gone, but the village is not empty. It is full of memories, of hope, of life continuing. If you listen, sometimes you might catch a whisper on the wind, laughter in the night, a song sung by a voice that is neither living nor dead. But these are gentle things, reminders rather than warnings. They are the signs of a village that has learned at last the value of sleep and of waking. You close your eyes, finally ready for rest, and as you drift away, you know you are not alone. The village, the world, the story itself will continue because you and all of Dunwhiddle have chosen to remember. And so, for the first time in what feels like forever, you sleep. This time, you dream.